Oh, okay. I'm going to mute myself here. That's probably.
Speaking of Jill,
That's very funny. Hi. Oh, she's muted.
Here we go. Hi there. Hi, everybody.
Jill.
Hi.
Hey, stop. Oh, I'll be right back.
So we are being streamed on Facebook, just so you know, if you don't, just, you know. We'll wait a couple more minutes for a few more people and then we'll
Yeah,
get going.
I hope we have a few more.
I hope so. Well, I think Sarah said she was gonna sign on.
Oh, good.
Well, it is a beautiful day outside. You got a lot of competition with the weather.
Uh-oh.
Don't feel any pressure, George.
I'm probably the only Rhode Island transplant in this conversation.
Oh, I am.
Oh, Judy.
Oh, right. Oh, true.
Yeah.
True.
Judy, congratulations on your grandson.
Thank you.
That's my alarm to get here. Okay.
George, you might be the, given your talents in the Rhode Island Jewish historical community, you might be our #1 Rhode Island Jew. You're right up there.
I guess I better increase my gift to something. Did you see those photos, Jimmy, that I sent to Steve today?
I did, yeah. Yeah.
Did you ever notice those
No.
letters?
No, that's my cousin, Steve Kay's father was Barney Kay, and they owned Kay's of Newport, which
With Mel
was,
Blake.
Oh, where my mother shopped all the time.
I think a lot of people shop there. Yeah, yeah. They had a store originally in Newport and Providence, and then they had 50 or 60 stores around the country.
Oh,
So I
But
think that,
yeah.
it's in the space that is now looks on the square.
yeah, it actually probably occupied two of those commercial units.
Uh-huh. But
And the basement, I mean, it was a big place.
Wow.
Yeah.
No, but if you,
On Wayland Avenue?
yeah, if you enter from the rear where the parking is and you look above the awning,
Yeah.
you can still see painted letters, very faded, that say K's Newport.
Oh, I have to go look for that.
So I took some pictures for a member of the K family who's
Yeah.
Jimmy Tobac's cousin.
Right.
We'll wait one more minute and we'll get going.
There were 5 K brothers. They were all from Albany.
Huh.
Whoop, you're mute. We can't hear you, Mel.
I just made a joke. It was bad. So
So
no,
you can
no,
take
no.
it back now.
We love bad jokes.
So Pat censored you, eh?
no, it was very clean. It just didn't make too much sense. So
So Mel, you're in Narragansett.
I am.
Okay, so we're taking in a lot of geography this afternoon.
Okay, so we're 4:02. You want to wait another minute or get going?
Boy, Sonny, I don't recognize you with those glasses.
Hi,
There you are.
Sonny, right.
Hi, Sonny.
Hi, Sonny. Great to
Sonny.
see you.
Hey, Sunny.
You look like you've already been to the
Oh.
hairdresser.
There's
How do you look so good?
She always looks good.
Rabbi Sarah, hi.
I know.
Hi.
Hi. Okay, when we get
Okay,
Going.
so just so you know, everybody, this is our congregant, George Goodwin. We thank him for stepping up to do a program for us today. We are on Facebook Live, so if you can turn off your camera if you'd like. He did say we could leave open our mics to hear each other, but just if you have any background noise, you should mute yourself. And he's going to start his presentation at this time. And Do you mind interruptions, George?
No.
If people have questions?
No,
Okay.
this will be a conversation. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining me. I hope we have some fun. Did anybody see the questions that were posted on the Temple website? Jill, Jim did.
Only
Okay.
2 minutes ago. I didn't realize they were there. I'm sorry.
Okay, that's okay. There are 25 true and false questions. And I'm going to read each question and we can talk about the answers. And then we'll know who has to repeat a year or two of religious school or who will get advanced placement in college.
Great.
Okay. So as you probably figured out, if you did see the questions, there are a lot of tricks. That some of the
Ooh.
questions are largely true, but have some false elements as well. Okay, are you ready?
Ready.
And
Sure.
we can talk about these. We're going to try and be finished by 5 if possible. Okay, number 1, and we'll go through each one at a time instead of asking the questions and then returning. Okay, so first question: Jews have lived continuously in Rhode Island since 1658. True or false?
Oh, I can't decide if it's 57 or 58.
No, that's not. That's not a.
Well,
That's not a
it's,
trick.
it's true if Roger Williams was Jewish. I would
I
say
don't think-
false.
Yeah, me too.
It is false. As some of you know, particularly the Newporters among us, there were no Jews living in Newport after 1822. The Newport community essentially disappeared as a result of the Revolutionary War. Some went to Canada, others fled inland, but the community never reestablished itself. And by the 1780s, there were literally only a few individuals left. So the last left at the year I mentioned. And as you also know, a community didn't begin to return to Newport until approximately the mid 19th century. And these were largely summer visitors, but they were able to use Touro Synagogue. Okay, so that was false. Number 2, Newport's Touro Synagogue is the oldest in North America.
Yeah, right?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
No, the
Yeah.
building, the structure.
Yeah, the
Depends on
number-
how you
structure.
count, right?
Pardon?
Well, I was going to say
This
yes,
is-
but
This is a frequently misunderstood point, especially in Rhode Island. It is the oldest extant, oldest remaining synagogue in North America. The first synagogue was, of course, built for the first colonial congregation, Shearith Israel, in New York City. And that structure was built in 1730. Touro dates from 1763. But of course, Touro has survived and flourished all these years, whereas Shearith Israel has had 5 synagogue buildings. The current one
why?
dates till about 1896. But essentially, each time the community moved farther northward in Manhattan, it built a new synagogue. So Touro is the second oldest in North America. Number 3, Providence's oldest Jewish institution, founded in 1854, is our Temple Bethel.
I don't know.
I'll buy that.
That's essentially correct. It's true. Of course, that wasn't the original name of the congregation. as we know from our legal name still, was Congregation Israel, which was later joined by Congregation David. So we're still officially Congregation Sons of Israel and David. If you really wanted to be fussy, and I guess I am too much, but the first Jewish institution was actually the establishment of the Jewish cemetery,
That's what I thought.
which became Bethel's or Congregation Sons of Israel within a year or so. That's a pretty fine distinction. But
Yeah.
number 3 is true. Okay, number 4. Am I going too slowly, too quickly?
And George,
Is this-
is a point, one of the interesting points there is that when Jews congregate to form a committee or a community, the first objective is to establish a cemetery as opposed to a synagogue.
That is absolutely true in most cases. It's a very important point. And in fact, how do we know that Jews were living or arrived in Newport by 1658? Because there is pardon?
Because there was a cemetery with graves.
Exactly. There is a document which demonstrates the purchase of the land that became the cemetery. And of course, that is the same cemetery that exists today. And therefore, Truro has the oldest Jewish cemetery in continual use in North America.
I would say non-use, George.
Right. Since
Well, the ambassador is going there.
we hope. Or he
For
hopes.
$2 or $3 million, yes.
No, but most likely New York had an older cemetery, but it only lasted a few years. So, and the second cemetery still exists, but Truro has had the oldest cemetery in perpetual use. Okay. So, question 4. In her 1867 poem about Truro Synagogue, Emma Lazarus, a summer resident of Newport, first referred to, in quotations, a new colossus.
What?
I'll read it again. Okay.
Read that again.
Okay. In her 1867 poem about Truro Synagogue, Emma Lazarus, the important Jewish poet, who was a summer resident of Newport, referred to in this poem, quote, a new colossus.
I think that's wrong because that's on the Statue of Liberty, isn't it?
It's not about Truro Synagogue.
That's correct. That's correct. Her most famous poem became eventually attached to the base of the Statue of Liberty and was actually created to raise funds for the construction of the Statue of Liberty. But she was a summer visitor to
Oh.
Newport in the 1860s. Her prosperous Sephardic family had a home in Newport. The building still exists and is used as a residence. But and she did write a poem in 1867 about Truro Synagogue. But of course, it didn't refer to a new colossus. But it's interesting that in this poem, she wrote, in quotations, "The sacred shrine is holy yet." That was her reference to the synagogue. And by contrast, I think it was Hawthorne who had visited Truro Synagogue a few years earlier, and he wrote a poem essentially declaring that the congregation had died and would be no more. So Emma Lazarus's poem was in some sense a reply and retort of the earlier poem. Okay, so that was false. Number 5. In 1877, our Bethel was one of the first congregations in New England to join the Reconstructionist movement.
False.
Yeah.
To join the reform group.
Right.
We keep thinking there's a trick in here. all the
Yeah, there are a lot of tricks.
time.
George is very diabolical.
Yeah, Bethel was perhaps the second New England congregation to join the Union of American Hebrew Congregations. And Temple Israel was most likely the first, but the two were within a year or even less than 12 months of one another. And kind of a footnote to a footnote is that when the Temple's first synagogue building was dedicated in downtown Providence on Friendship Street in 1890, Rabbi Isaac Mayer Weiss was the speaker. And of course, he had been the founder of the union and the college and the Central Conference of American Rabbis. So it was quite an honor for him to participate in that ceremony. Okay. Number 6. Most Jews who settled in Rhode Island during the late 19th and early 20th centuries landed in Boston, Fall River, or Providence.
What do you mean by landed?
Well, their ships arrived in those harbors.
False.
True.
False.
Wait a minute. Most, say that again.
Let's
Most
I'll read it
Jews
again.
that settled in Rhode Island.
Most Jews who settled in Rhode Island
Yeah,
during the late 19th and early 20th centuries
yeah.
landed, their ships landed in Boston, Fall River, or Providence.
No, they all came to New York, right?
Or Norfolk.
That is correct. About 90% of people who eventually settled in Rhode Island, Jews who settled in Rhode Island, arrived in New York.
What about the Fable line? Wouldn't that bringing Jews?
Yes, yes.
That didn't come directly to,
There were ships, but in a sense, Rhode Island was a second
okay.
community of attraction, as were so many others in New England and elsewhere. In fact, my own ancestors who arrived in New York eventually made their way to Hartford. Okay, number 7. In 1915, William Howard Taft became the second US president to speak at a Rhode Island synagogue. I'll read it again. In
Former.
1915, William Howard Taft became the second former US president to speak at a Rhode Island synagogue. There are a few tricks there. Surprise.
Well,
Second,
we know
Washington was the first.
Washington was
not a
president. He
former
wasn't,
president when he spoke.
he wasn't a former president
right.
when Washington spoke.
Right.
So
Okay,
just wanted-
that's the catch. Of course, Taft did speak at Bethel in South Providence because he was acquainted with a very distinguished member of the congregation, Harry Cutler. And Taft, after serving as president, became a law professor at Yale, and it was actually later appointed to the US Supreme Court. But Cutler invited Taft to speak at Passover in, when was it? 1917, did I say?
You said
1915. Okay, so the question is, what about Washington? Although I should mention that a few other presidents have visited Rhode Island synagogues. One example is Eisenhower, who during his presidency vacationed in Newport. And we have a record that one day he briefly visited Truro to see what it was, but there was not a service and he didn't address anybody. Okay, so Washington visited Newport twice. First in 1781 and then in 1790. But the question is, did he speak either within Truro or outside? And most likely he did not, because in those years, the building was no longer used as a synagogue, so he wouldn't be addressing Jews within it. The building, as Jimmy probably well knows from 4th or 5th grade, was used as the State House and also as to house the Supreme Court. So no doubt Washington was aware of Truro, and he probably rode or walked by it, but in 1781, but in 1790, this is of course the date of the most famous exchange of letters, probably in all of American history, between a sitting president and a Jewish organization. And as you well know, this was the occasion where a member of Truro Synagogue, Moses Satius, wrote to Washington as not only a leader of the congregation, but as a Mason. And of course, Washington was a Mason, and invited Washington to visit. And in turn, Washington wrote the letter, and I'm wanting to quote a few sentences of it. But essentially, Washington returned the spirit of Satius's letter and said, the US government gives to bigotry no sanction, to persecution no assistance. And this is probably the clearest statement by a president or top federal leader up until that time, and maybe ever since, about the respect for, in a sense, minority faiths in the United States. So the question is actually false. Taft did speak at Bethel. It's very unlikely that Washington spoke inside the synagogue or to a Jewish congregation. Okay, as you see, we're moving chronologically. Number 8, by 1920, Jewish congregations were established in Bristol, Cranston, Pawtucket, Westerly, and Woonsocket. True or false?
True.
Bristol, Cranston, Pawtucket, Westerly, and Woonsocket.
True.
It's true, except Adelina High, except for one of those towns.
Cranston.
Correct, Cranston. Cranston didn't build a synagogue until 1952. The Cranston Jewish Center, the congregation was organized shortly earlier. But I think the interesting point is that all these smaller outlying towns did have their own congregations and their own buildings by the 1920s. And I think this is one point that non-Rhode Islanders don't easily grasp, that of course they're aware of Newport and Providence, but they probably don't understand that there have been so many much smaller Jewish communities strung all over the state. And each had to have its own communal organizations. Okay. And if you want to add points, please feel free. Number 9. Having been established in 1925, the Jewish Federation of Rhode Island later known as the Jewish Alliance, became the first federation in New England. True or false?
False.
False.
You're right. This is false. This is another kind of silly statement. There wasn't a federation of Rhode Island until 1970. And its predecessor was only for Providence. It was established in 1945, and it was called the General Jewish Committee of Providence. The first federation in New England was in Boston in 1895. So Rhode Island's federation was extremely late. And one of the reasons is that Rhode Island was, even though the geographical area was small, the communities, the Jewish communities within them were so scattered and fragmented, and to some degree resisted an earlier movement to unify and consolidate. And even within the past 10 years or so, up until the time I was president of Providence Hebrew Free Loan, I would hear occasional remarks from board members who would say something like, well, look, you know, those people in Providence, what do they know? We live in Warwick, we live in Pawtucket. We'll do things our way. And in fact, up until a few years ago, there were 5 Providence Hebrew Free Loan Associations in Rhode Island. Now I think there are only 2, but
One.
Rhode Island, 1,
Yeah, right. They merged,
that Providence merged with
South Providence.
South Providence and moved to Cranston. Right, which I think was a bit foolish, because one of the reasons the Providence Hebrew Free Loan survived and flourished to some degree was because borrowers could walk or take a bus to the office. They didn't need a car. So I'm afraid it may be difficult for today's borrowers to somehow get to an office from, at least from Providence to Cranston. So I think it's unfortunate that Rhode Island didn't establish a federation and a now an alliance until very late in the game, at least compared to Boston. Okay. Number 10, Miriam Hospital, opened in South Providence in 1926 to care for Jewish patients by serving kosher food and hiring Yiddish-speaking staff, as well as employing Jewish doctors. So read that again. You got it. Miriam Hospital opened in South Providence in 1926 to care for Jewish patients by serving kosher food, hiring Yiddish-speaking staff, and hiring Jewish doctors.
You know, they hired Jewish doctors. I mean, that was like the
But
whole thing.
did they start off on Summit Avenue up there?
No,
They did not? Okay.
this is true. It's interesting that the original building still stands. The building had been an apartment house. Then it was transformed into a hospital. And after the hospital moved to the east side, the building once again became an apartment house, which it is today.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But obviously these were the principal reasons. Jewish doctors weren't welcome at Rhode Island Hospital and other facilities, but Miriam served kosher food and some of its staff spoke Yiddish. Does anybody happen to know why Miriam moved to its present location? It's a bonus question.
So it'd be more convenient.
Well, yeah, that makes sense, but there was a practical reason.
There was a what kind of reason?
A practical reason why it moved to the place it did.
Supposedly the Jewish orphanage was on that site,
That's correct.
and they either sold it or gave it to the hospital. I can't recall.
That's right. There were actually had been two Jewish orphanages. Eventually they combined and they moved to the east side in about 1935. But there weren't enough orphans to sustain it. So the orphanage closed. And within a couple years, Miriam purchased the land and relocated there. Unfortunately, I've never found an inscription or a sign on the facade of the Miriam that points out that that particular building, which still stands where the orphanage was, had been the orphanage. I think it would be.
It's there someplace, because I remember
is?
seeing it someplace, but I can't remember where, because I've seen it.
You have. Okay, I'll look again. Okay. Number 11.
True.
During Prohibition, Rhode Island had a higher percentage of Jewish bootleggers than any state in New England.
True.
Did anybody have a relative who was a bootlegger? Yeah?
Well, Newport.
Yes, but in New Bedford.
I had one, but not in Rhode Island, right?
I read.
Yeah, Newport was a pretty big port of entry for bootleg liquor. And I had at least 2 or 3 members of my family.
Oh, they were more than 3, Jim.
Would you, Jim, would you care to identify them?
Well, one was a fellow who's had a what was the name? Standard Wholesale, and that was Louis Nass.
Yes.
And he was in business with a fellow named Schmelzer, and there was another, I can't remember the other.
Owen's father, didn't he have?
Who?
Owen Lehrman's father? Did he?
No, he had a
No.
liquor store,
Okay.
but they then became very successful in a wine distribution business that I think ultimately became one of the big wine distribution or liquor distributions in the state.
Okay. This answer is true and false. There's no way for us to prove it one way or the other, unfortunately. Over my 17 years of editing the Journal of the Rhode Island Historical Association, we've never had a good article about bootleggers, and I think somebody has to do it. Most likely there were many Jewish bootleggers here, as in many other places, but we have no idea yet how many.
George, are you suggesting a possible fundraiser?
You mean
Sorry, I couldn't resist.
to do what?
The bootlegging. I thought maybe you were suggesting
okay.
in these times.
Yeah, I think we should have a Sons and Daughters of Jewish Bootleggers Association, which should have an annual banquet to raise money for a charitable institution. Okay. Number 12. Camp Jory, established in 1937, is named for a legendary chief of the Narragansetts.
No,
Of course,
You sure
Mel
about
is,
that, Sarah?
no.
Mel is one of the
Oh, McGreedy,
leaders of Camp
Jory
Jory.
Christmas.
But it's funny that when our son Michael was a camper at Jory, I didn't know what Jory meant. So I asked a number of staff and they had no idea either. So I thought, okay, I have to figure this out. And the answer was quite easy. The camp was established as the summer camp of the Jewish orphanage of Rhode Island, Jory. So the interesting thing is that name has stuck. long after the orphanage disappeared. Now, does anybody each summer explain to the kids or the staff where Jory
know.
comes from?
I don't know, probably not, probably not. Good point.
Well, it's an easy name. That's
Yep.
worth keeping, I guess. Okay, number 13, we're about halfway through. The first Federation campaign to exceed $1 million was in 1948.
I have no idea.
Makes sense, but I'm not sure that's right. I mean,
Okay, if
Independence.
it does make sense, but if it weren't 48, when might it have been?
57, 67.
Right, after a war.
Right.
I'm
This is
going with 48.
This is true. The first $1 million campaign was in 48, which was obviously a huge amount of money, especially if you consider today that a typical Federation campaign raises, I don't know,
Right.
5-6 million, something
No,
like
Lower.
three to
Lower.
four.
3 or 4.
Yeah,
Three to
That's
four.
all.
well, it's- right.
Right. Of course, there are many fewer Jews living in Rhode Island today, but the point is that in 1948, $1 million was a very huge and generous amount. And
Correct.
actually, you can guess. Let's see if I use it as a question. I forgot. When the next milestone Federation campaign was. Take a guess.
After the 6-Day War.
Yeah, the Yom Kippur War. wasn't
Yeah.
it?
Six-Day War makes sense. It was actually the Yom Kippur War, which raised, I think, over 3 million.
Okay.
But you keep in mind that I think with the War of Independence and the subsequent wars, these were special campaigns. They weren't just the normal annual campaign. Either there was a separate fund demarcated for Israel to aid the wars, or funds were allocated in a larger amount. I don't know. Okay, 14. Ledgemont Country Club, originally located in West Warwick, did not admit Jews until it relocated to Seekonk in 1949. Read that again.
It was founded as a Jewish.
Right. False. Ledgemont was founded as a Jewish country club in 1925. And it purchased property in Warwick. The club was dedicated 26, and its membership was probably 99% Jewish. And then, of course, it relocated to Seekonk in 49. Question is, and this isn't on the quiz, but why did it relocate? And why there?
Well, the thing, as I understand it, the club in Warwick is only 9 holes.
That's true.
And so a Seekonk site gave the ability to have an 18-hole golf course. Beyond that,
Well, that's a major reason, but there's a lesser
Alcohol?
reason.
Something to do with drinking? Getting back to the bootleggers?
Could be. That's not what I have in mind. I think it was more about eating though than drinking. No, actually, this is easily forgotten today, but there was an effort to attract many members of the Fall River and even New Bedford Jewish communities, that it was a better location than
Makes sense.
Warwick.
Yeah.
Right, and they, and in that regard, the move was successful. In the earlier decades, there were dozens of members from Fall River and elsewhere. Of course, one of my points in asking this variety of questions is to show that Jewish history touches on just about everything you can imagine, whether it's drink or food or recreation or sports or philanthropy, and besides all the obvious points. And I think that's one reason why Jewish history is so compelling and sometimes even fun, that it's never ending. Okay. 15. Beginning in 1953, 3 Jewish women from Rhode Island have served as national chairs of UJA's women's division. 3.
Yes.
That is true.
Oh,
True.
It seems remarkable for such,
It is.
small state that we've had 3 Rhode Islanders of national stature, among
Right.
others in national.
So
Position.
Roberta Holland,
Hassenfeld.
Well, there are
Hassenfeld,
2.
Um,
Who was the first?
Roberta Holland
no,
Roberta Holland was
Holland.
3rd.
was what?
Roberta
Third.
Holland.
Sylvia Hassenfeld, who eventually became the national chair of Highest, she was 2nd. So who was first? She was actually a Bethel member.
Roberta Holland, she wasn't a Rhode Islander. She came from California.
Who's that?
Roberta. She
Roberta
married
Holland?
Marvin after Harriet died.
But she was a member of Bethel.
Yeah, you're
Roberta?
right, Sandra, about that. That Roberta became a Rhode Islander, but who was the first chronologically to become a national chair of UJA?
I don't know.
She was a Fane.
Oh,
Pillivan.
Yes, Selma Fane Pillivan.
okay.
And actually, I interviewed her toward the very end of her life, and the focus of that conversation was about her generosity to the RISD Art Museum, that she was responsible for establishing the first collection of modern European and American art, which was assembled in memory of her husband, Albert, who had been an amateur artist.
Who's the 3rd one?
So it was Selma Pillivan,
Roberta Holland.
Sylvia Hassenfeld, and Roberta Holland.
Oh,
Okay,
A lot of people think they have something and come in, is that it?
can't hear. No. Okay. Question 16. In 1954, Temple Bethel became Rhode Island's first and only Jewish congregation to build 3 synagogues, all with choir lofts.
I don't
You know the answer.
do.
True, true.
I didn't know if the other buildings had choir.
Right, right. That's the trick. We do know from photos, and of course, some of our Ellis members may remember the building on Broad Street, but we know from descriptions that the first building on Friendship Street also had a choir loft. The question then follows, how many of the synagogues had organs? I don't know. At least 2 of them did.
Okay.
Don't know about the first. Okay, but okay, let's move on. Number 17. In 1959, when Milton Stanzler helped found the Rhode Island affiliate of the ACLU, he sought permission for Jews to light a Hanukkah in the State House.
No.
That's a trick question. That's false. Milton Stanzler was, however, one of the founders of the Rhode Island affiliate of the ACLU in 1959. But of course, one of its major purposes was
Right,
to-
separation.
to establish
Right.
clearer boundaries, if not a wall of separation
Yeah.
between church and state. And even though some of you know that I, over many years, have occasionally helped out with the Chabad Minyan, and Jimmy has too, and I enjoy and Rabbi Laufer a great deal, but one thing that totally annoys and horrifies me is that he is very proud of conducting an annual Hanukkah lighting ceremony within the State House. And I've explained to him over and over again, this is wrong, it's unconstitutional, don't do it. And I can have that discussion forever.
Yeah.
Okay. There is a very important parallel to this discussion, however. And that, of course, is a US Supreme Court case that was decided in 1992. And that, of course, relates to, again, the issue of separation of church of state. And you probably know that it originated in 1989 when Les very graciously volunteered to give what he thought was a non-sectarian prayer at public school graduation. And as you probably recall, the Weissman family, who had a daughter, Deborah, graduating at that time, was against the idea of any clergy person offering a prayer. So therefore, the Weissman sued the Providence School Committee and won. The school committee applied to the appellate court and lost. And then the case went to the US Supreme Court, and the Weissmans were
Clayton.
were supported. Okay. But I think as much as we we're proud of the very long history of Jewish life in Rhode Island, I think this struggle between the boundaries of church and state will always be with us. Because obviously there are Gentiles and Jews who don't understand or respect the various boundaries. Okay. 18. In 1965, 3 Rhode Island rabbis marched with Reverend Martin Luther King from Selma to Montgomery, Alabama.
False.
True,
True.
true.
Was it 1965?
65. This is true.
It's true. Who
This
are the
is
other
true.
rabbis?
Does anybody have an idea who the rabbis were?
Okay, so
Rowdy.
Rabbi Browdy,
Right. Rabbi Browder,
Rabbi
Bowen.
Lumbert.
Bowen,
Who?
rabbi from Emmanuel.
no, he
Rabbi
wasn't. He was involved in civil rights activities, and there's a famous photo of him where he's seated at a table with King, but Bowen didn't go.
Oh, really?
No,
Okay.
and I don't know why he did or he didn't. But one was the Brown Hillel rabbi, Nathan Rosen,
Okay.
and the other was Saul Lehman.
Oh, right.
Was he at Cranston at that time?
I don't know, but the
I thought
name
it was
is so
Emmanuel.
familiar. Yeah,
No.
I think so.
Well,
Yeah.
I don't think it was Emmanuel. But essentially, these three distinguished rabbis, and I'd say equally distinguished civil rights leaders, went on their own without congregational support. They paid their own ways, and they did what they thought was just. And I think we can all be thankful for those mitzvot. 19. And of course, there were many Christian clergy from Rhode Island who also went. There may have been 15
Yeah.
Rhode Island clergymen, and I don't know if there are any women. 19. Trinity Repertory, Rhode Island's leading theater company, evolved from a group of amateur actors at Providence's JCC.
I think that's false.
I think it's
Yeah,
true.
it doesn't-
I think it's true.
I think it's true.
It is true.
wow.
Again, Milton Stanzer was a catalyst for the creation of what became Trinity Rep, as he had been for the creation of the ACLU. I actually know many details of this Trinity story because I had served as the archivist at Trinity Rep following Adrian Hall's 25-year tenure, and I organized the vast collection and did a huge oral history collection, blah, blah, blah. But Adrian was a New York director who was hired to do a couple shows, to direct a couple shows at the JCC. And he was a success. So he was asked the following year to direct a few more. And Adrian, who didn't have other work, said, yeah, I'd love to. And of course, by this time, he thought, I will bring some of my friends who are professional actors and actresses to perform in these JCC shows. So what happened essentially was Milton and Norman Tillis and some others decided that they should break away from the JCC and try and establish an independent repertory company and have Adrian as a regular advisor. And Adrian thought this was a great idea, seeing that he could build upon this group and essentially establish his own organization and fire the JCC amateurs. And that's essentially what happened, although Milton and some others stayed on the Trinity Rep board and helped lead it for many years. In fact, Bruce Sundlin became a president of Trinity Rep a few decades later.
Pick up something on the phone.
Okay, question 20. Rhode Island has elected 2 Jewish governors, 3 Jewish attorneys general, and 2 Jewish congressmen.
Well, let's wait. Let's think about this now.
Yeah, 2 Jewish governors, 3 attorneys general, and 2 congressmen.
Okay, so we got the 2 governors,
We
right?
got the governors.
Sutherland and Leach, we know those.
Right.
Okay, now
Well,
what's the
and
next
of
one?
course, Leach was first, then Sundlin.
Yes,
3 Jewish attorneys general.
so Jeff
Can you name those?
Pine, Jeff
Jeff
Pine,
Pine.
one.
He was the last.
No, he was
Um,
Michelson.
Right. Julius Michelson was second.
Wasn't Richard Leach?
No. Richard Leach was lieutenant governor.
Former president of our temple who lives on
That's right.
in the western part of Massachusetts. So
Right.
Richard,
Right.
Right.
Oh, right,
Richard,
right.
what's his last
Richard
name?
Israel. Dick Israel.
Dick Israel.
Richard Israel.
Dick Israel was the
Right,
first.
Right. And then what, so then Congressman David Cicilline, right?
Right. So there haven't been 2 Jewish
Just
Congress
one.
people.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the question is
False.
false because of 2 Jewish congressmen.
Okay,
So,
All right.
but the related question is this a lot of Jewish elected officials compared to other states? And the answer is it is and it isn't. That's a Jewish answer, right?
Right.
Connecticut has done as well and has elected Jewish senators where we have not.
Okay.
Okay. 21. We'll finish up quickly. Many of the state's leading retail businesses, including the Outlet Company, Benny's, Apex, Ross Simons, and Walgreens, were established by Jews.
Obviously.
Well, all of them are,
Walgreens
the
is not.
only
a
one I
brand.
don't know is who's
Correct.
Walgreens.
That's the
CVS, of course.
Walgreens is
Outlet
in
Company,
Deerfield,
Benny's,
Illinois.
Apex, Ross Simons, not Walgreens.
Not Walgreens, right?
Right.
Okay,
But it's interesting that we could put in many other prominent businesses
right.
on that list. Okay, 22. In 1968, the last Jewish steam bath opened in Providence's North End.
North End.
Right, that would be
Where is
Smith
that?
Hill.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was like, I didn't think of it as a North End, but okay, yeah. Right. Okay, so what did you say? What year? What?
In 1968, the last Jewish steam bath or communal bath
Yeah,
opened in Providence's North End.
no.
Any other thoughts? That is false.
Yeah. I
The
mean,
last Jewish steam bath closed
Yeah,
in
yeah.
1968.
I mean,
Right.
really.
But there, at one time, there were 3 or 4 and others in South Providence as well.
Really.
Okay, 23. In 1971, Brown became the first university in the Ivy League to hire a Jewish president.
Okay,
But
now,
No, 71. Who was the president in 71? I mean,
Honig?
yeah, Honig. No,
It was,
yeah.
I think, I can't tell you that.
Walgreens was not in Rhode Island.
It is false.
Yeah, okay.
Who was the first Jewish president of Brown?
Paxson.
That's
Castile.
right. The current
Paxton.
president.
Yeah, Paxson.
Okay,
Okay.
so there is something noteworthy, though, about Brown in 1970.
They
1971.
admitted women to Brown.
Well,
Yeah,
that's notable too, but within the Jewish domain.
oh, okay.
In 1971,
Jewish women.
in 1971, Brown became the first member of the Ivy League that hired a Jewish chaplain.
Oh,
That's Richard Marker.
wow.
And
Okay.
of course, the first, anybody happen to know the first Ivy League university that hired a Jewish president?
Okay, wait. No, I
It
don't.
wasn't
It
Princeton.
was 1970.
Harvard.
It wasn't Princeton.
No,
Wasn't Yale.
no,
Harvard.
Larry Summer.
no.
Penn.
1970 was Penn.
Okay,
Martin Meyerson.
okay.
Okay, 2 more questions. 2 of the state's longest serving congregational rabbis have led Bethel.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's true. We've only had 2 until now.
That is true. Both Rabbi Brauda and Rabbi Gutterman set records for the longest tenures. Brauda from 1932 to 74, Les from 1970 to 2015. But there are 3 others who've come very close. Anybody want to guess who?
Rabbi Franklin.
Right. Franklin, 38 years.
Bonin?
Bonin.
No, not Bonin.
Oh,
Theodore Lewis.
That was certainly one of the longest tenures, but not close to 40 years.
We give up.
Jackal Linzer
Oh,
in Middletown served 41 years.
Really?
Yes, and Rabbi Laufer of Chabad has thus far served 40.
Oh.
But it is amazing that here we have 5 rabbis in our lifetimes who've served approximately 40 years. Okay, last question.
We don't like change.
Either the congregations don't or the rabbis don't. Obviously, a combination of the two. Last question. And thanks everybody for being a part of this. I had some fun. In 2018, when it's celebrating the centenary of Touro Fraternal Association, 3 legendary Providence barbers, Tony, Fred, and Stefano, were elected honorary members.
that's
Touro
true.
Fraternal. True?
Yeah. I
Anybody
saw
else
that
vote for
somewhere.
true?
Did I see that somewhere? See that somewhere? Not true, huh?
How many people remember Tony on Hope Street? Anybody remember him?
Is he the guy that carries the briefcase?
No, he gets his own question now. Fred D'Ambrosia was on Wayland Square for
Right.
a zillion years.
And
And
Stefano
Stefano,
was our Moshambo.
he's
Well, that
still there,
I've
assuming
seen
he
that
comes
sign.
back.
Yeah.
So all those are legendary Providence barbers, and we'd love to see them right at this moment. But Touro did not honor them.
All right.
Unfortunately.
Maybe they should. Maybe they should.
Maybe they should. But the upshot is, if you were keeping track, a measure of my deviousness, there were far more false questions, false answers than true. There were 8 true and 17 false.
Thanks for doing this, George.
No,
That was good. That was
But
great.
maybe
So much fun.
Yeah.
Thanks,
that
George. This
was
was
fun.
great.
Thanks, George.
Thank you.
Be well, everybody.
See
Lots
you.
of fun.
Thank
Daniel.
And
you.
everybody.
Have a
Thank
great
you.
evening.
Take care.
Take care, be well.
See you. Bye.
See you soon, everyone.
Yes.
Thanks, Sarah.
Just told that kid.